This here is one of Lazer's latest offerings, the GTEK Wireless Gaming Controller Pro, a controller targeted for mobile devices and cloud gaming. Coming in at $90 Australian, there's definitely some competition to be had in this price range. I'm Justin, and today we'll be taking a closer look at the GTEK and run through our experiences with it. Let's first start off with unboxing and packaging. It's simple and no frills, about what you expect at this price point, which is more than fine by me. Along with the controller, you get some paperwork and a USB-A to C charging cable. I do appreciate that the instructions are nicely laid out and in plain English, which is quite important for a controller like this that packs a lot of features. One small hindrance is the inaccurate labeling of the triggers as the select and start buttons on the array diagram, but this isn't too big of a deal. Let's move on. This GTEK controller adopts the Xbox style layout, although the ABXY buttons do also feature your cross, circle, triangle, square combo if you're more familiar with PlayStation's offerings. It's perhaps important to note that there is no RGB lighting on the controller, which contradicts Lazer's claims on their website. Maybe they meant the power button? Definitely a bit misleading. Anyways, there's your start and select buttons on the top, with two extra on the bottom. One is the turbo button, which allows for a rapid fire effect for any of the controller's buttons, between 8 to 25 bursts per second, which may come in handy if you're playing a game that requires repetitive inputs. The other button is a programming button, meant to help set the macros on the rear of the controller. These two buttons on the back can be set to a single input or a combo. We'll touch more on these features and their usefulness a bit later on. The controller's build is all plastic. No rubberized grips beyond the thumbsticks, meaning it should hold up just fine through lots of use without leaving residue on your hands. I like that where your palms sit are textured, so the controller won't be slipping out of your hands when gaming. The plastic build also helps keep the weight down at less than 200 grams excluding your phone or tablet. The whole unit does flex a little bit though, so it's best to handle it with the same amount of care as you would any other device. The buttons on the GTEK get the job done. The triggers are nice and smooth, though the shoulder buttons feel quite inconsistent with varying resistances depending on where you press. The face buttons do feel a bit loose, and lack the sharp tactile response that I'm used to from my Xbox controller. They could be better. It's the same story with the D-pad, which is rather mushy and feels noticeably worse than say a Switch controller. Though you are at least getting Hall effect triggers and thumbsticks, so stick drift won't ever be an issue. You also won't have to worry about your device falling from the controller, as the clamp force is quite substantial and the sides and middle pad are rubber. Even though it's not the smoothest sliding mechanism, there also aren't a lot of tiny moving parts, so it will last a good long while as the controller sees some use. Also make sure that your device will actually fit. Any smartphone will be fine, but tablets larger than 10 inches won't be able to squeeze in. On to Chris. Okay, Justin and I are pretty big gamers, whether that's on mobile or PC. Driving sims, NBA 2K, a bit of Marvel Rivals and PUBG Mobile, and we've both been playing around with the GTEK for the past 2 weeks or so. To sum up our experience, I'll say this: when it works, it works. Unfortunately, the controller does have its quirks, which we'll run through a bit in this section. Firstly, as the GTEK is a fully wireless controller, it features its own 350 mAh battery, promising 12 hours of usage with a 3-hour charge time. I haven't been able to fully test the capacity of the battery, but throughout our past week of frequent testing and troubleshooting, we haven't had to charge it once. Admittedly, the USB-C port is rather awkwardly placed, so keep that in mind if you're wanting to play this on low battery. If you're wanting to manage your controller and load game presets on your device, you'll need the Shooting Plus V3 app, which can be found on the Play Store and App Store. On the home screen, there's a bunch of different games which have pre-configured settings for the controller, so that you won't need to mess around with mapping inputs yourself. I will say that the UI isn't very clear, and I had to guess my way around it to get it to work in COD Mobile and PUBG. Other games like Last Day on Earth worked right out of the box with the app's preset. Nevertheless, they still did the trick, and you can even close the floating window so that it doesn't distract you in-game. Latency with the GTEK is not noticeable. I do also want to mention, unlike some of the more expensive controllers out there, this doesn't have any active cooling. My S21 Plus did get quite hot and stayed hot when cradled in the GTEK, so I wouldn't recommend using this thing in 35-degree weather. Your mileage may vary. Next, the pairing process. Sometimes, too much of something can be a bad thing. The GTEK has like 6 different pairing modes, whether that's for connecting to Android, iOS, PlayStation, whatever, but they don't all work as intended. For one, to use the Shooting Plus V3 app on Android, you can't connect the GTEK using the Android method, which is to hold the X key and then the power button. Instead, you have to hold down the A key and then the power button to enter into a different pairing mode. This carried over to our cloud gaming experience. For whatever reason, Steam Link didn't like the Android pairing method, and though we got it to work the first time we tried it, I think it was using the iOS pairing method, it refused to pair the next time we tried to play. We spent close to an hour trying to troubleshoot it, relinking Steam on both ends and resetting the controller using the dedicated button on the back, but no luck. Definitely not a fun experience. We also couldn't get the GTEK to work properly with my PC, in either the wired or wireless mode. I'd hazard a guess it's probably a D or X input problem, because only the D-pad inputs were recognised, though I'm not too sure. Windows knows that there is a controller connected otherwise, it's just that it's unusable. Perhaps downloading additional software to translate between input modes or something would work, but this was beyond the scope of our testing. Justin briefly mentioned the turbo mode before, and if you can make heads and tails of the rather long list of steps, it does work quite nicely. Here in PUBG, we've just binded it to the right trigger and swapped the gun over to single fire. It's a nice feature to have if you do want that sort of functionality. The GTEK does have vibration motors, as it kicks in when you activate turbo mode, but we couldn't test it in any games due to A lack of mobile games that actually support controller haptics, and B, our struggles to pair to our PC. Unfortunately, it's the same story with the gyro sensor. From some research we've done, it seems that only controllers that map the gyro to the sticks internally can really take advantage of this hardware. This GTEK is not one of those. Back to Justin. Wrapping it up, the GTEK does have its nuances. Pairing can be a bit tricky until you find the right mode, and at nearly $100, expecting a sturdier build wouldn't be unreasonable. It is largely smooth sailing once you do have everything set up, in Android mode that is, and the controller's features, like the turbo mode, are a nice touch. Ultimately, the controller should be all about making gaming more enjoyable, and the GTEK delivers on that front. With the games we tested, we both found ourselves having a great time, so if you do spot it on sale, it's definitely worth adding to your setup. Thanks for watching.